Malcolm Gladwell, the author of David and Goliath, which is now in paperback. In that book, you talk about something which I think is very important. It's sort of almost the key to success, which is the ability to take a risk. Because you have so many people who may be well-educated, they may be very bright, but they're risk-averse.
Yeah.
And it's tough to succeed if you're risk-averse. So what makes you embrace risk?
Well, I was very taken when I was writing the book. I had a chapter about a famous cancer researcher, a guy named J. Freireich, who is really one of the fathers of modern chemotherapy. In the history of 20th century medicine, he is up there in the... And his story is really fascinating because the time when he was pioneering, he and a small group of others were pioneering some of these very, very new ideas about how to treat cancer, he was reviled and denounced and considered to be pursuing inhumane medical ideas, theories, and practicing them on children. He was a child leukemia guy. He's really the guy who gets the ball rolling against child leukemia. And the question is, why would someone do that? Why would they embark on a course of action that entailed that much social risk? Basically, he placed his reputation on the line and risked his entire career as a medical scientist in pursuit of an idea. And for years and years and years, there was no even inkling it was going to work. And the answer he would give is he had nothing to lose. He was a kid from essentially the ghetto in Chicago. He didn't have a lot of friends. He wasn't big and warm and fuzzy. He was a kind of angry, driven, highly ambitious guy who felt he was incredibly lucky to be where he was at NIH, and if it failed, so what? I mean, it wasn't as if he came from, he had some massive legacy to protect. He still maintained this kind of very scrappy attitude that he carried with him from the west side of Chicago.
So here's the puzzle, and if that's true, and I suspect there's a lot of truth to it, does it mean that you kind of have to have nothing to lose to seek risk? If you're a guy who goes to Harvard and Harvard Law School and goes through has a nice opportunity to work at a corporate law firm, you're not going to start your own company. You've got too much to lose. You've got this clear income for the rest of your life. It's the guy who doesn't, who's going to be willing to take that risk.
This is a very interesting argument that I got into a little bit in David and Goliath, and that is that what are the downsides to affluence? So we know the good parts of affluence. We're well aware of them. But do you also take on certain liabilities when you raise a child in a culture of comfort where every need is taken care of? And the answer is that you do. I mean, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't raise a child in comfort. It just means that the path to doing something extraordinary is going to be a little more difficult. Not impossible, but a little more difficult. And you every week you sit here and you talk to people who have accomplished great things, and you must be struck, as I am when I observe these kinds of people, how often they do not come from the most privileged and comfortable of backgrounds, right? It's a cliche that we talk about, but doesn't that mean if you are someone contemplating raising a child that you should think twice about providing everything you can for that? I remember having a conversation years ago in my last book, Outliers, I had a chapter on the generation of Jewish men born in the 30s in the Bronx to the children of garment workers who rose to become the most powerful figures in the New York legal world. And I was talking to one of these guys, and he was telling me about how they all grew up in the Bronx. The parents all had nothing. They all went to NYU when it was a commuter school and City College. And then he was saying, I said, well, what about... And he was talking about how crucial that was to the fact they took this enormous chance in the 50s and 60s to doing M&A law, when M&A law was bottom of the barrel, nobody wanted to do it, and they were like, we're going to do it, and we're going to take, So I was talking to this guy about his children. I said, well, where do you send your children? He goes, well, I wanted only the best for them. And every one of them went to a private school and an Ivy League school. I said, well, and I said to him, well, aren't you then closing the very door that was open to you because of your own modest upbringing? And it didn't compute. Here's a guy with an IQ of 190, right? one of those brilliant men, and could not see this contradiction between his own childhood, which he saw as absolutely central to his own success, and the fact that he had deprived his own children of that same kind of.
So what should he do? I mean, I've sent my children into the wild to be raised by wolves, but I mean,
Yeah.
what do you do?
I sat down when I was writing David and Goliath with a guy who's a psychologist who basically his practice is talking to the wealthy about how to raise their children. And his argument is you have to understand that parenting is very difficult when you have no money. It gets easier as you start to get more money. And then as you get too much money, it gets harder again. You have to understand that if you are wealthy, the task of being a good parent requires an awful lot more time and attention than it does if you're middle class. He talks about this difference between can't and won't. When you're middle class and your child asks for a pony, you say, we can't. End of story. There's no need to give any explanation because it's simply it's a ridiculous, impossible request. When you're a millionaire and your child says, I want a Ferrari when I'm 16, you can't say you can't anymore because you clearly can't. You have to be able to say, we won't. And that means you have to articulate a reason. Give a child a sense of what he and you and your family stand for and why you are choosing to deny your child something that you could supply as easily as that. And that's hard, right? That takes practice and you got to think about it. You have to, and that's, I think, a really, really crucial point. And I think many parents assume that affluence makes their lives and the lives of their children easier, and they forget, no, it makes it harder.